Hello, this is Blaire Stanislao with the Happy Lion Center. Welcome to our podcast, Mystical and Infamous, where we have playful and easy conversations about anything mystical, getting to the heart of all things strange and weird. Join us in a bit of magical tomfoolery, spreading the alchemy of love and light. And now, we invite you to enjoy the show.
A lot of my clients, what I'm seeing is the guides are telling me as well as them to simplify and bring things to the 3D and make it much more practical. And I think it's kind of this like energy right now as we move from the winter into the spring of planting the seeds, and that analogy of really germinating on what it is that we're bringing forth. It's not, for me, the energy I'm feeling right now isn't go, 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 go. It's very much like, okay, under the ground, what is happening? Like Mother Earth is coming out of winter and going into spring, but we're not blooming yet, especially in the Northern Hemisphere, which most of my clients are. And, but also just this emphasis on not focusing so much only on the astral realms or the like higher frequencies or, you know, the channeling, but also how do I bring it into the physical? How do I bring it into my day-to-day life? Because I think a big thing that people forget is, you know, the consciousness is being brought into the human body. It isn't us escaping consciousness, right? The people who are waking up and the people who are being called to share the mission or the vision of the ascension of Earth, they're not monks. They're not Buddhists who are up on a mountaintop, excluding themselves from the real life. They're moms, they're dads, they're real people. And I think there's been a really big emphasis in the world that I'm in, the people in my world around, okay, you channel all this information, but then how do you make it implemented in your real life? Like, how do you help people that are at the grocery store? Like, how can we become the vibration of, you know, the Christ consciousness? And like, how do we impact the people in our lives and we don't seclude ourselves into, you know, creating this like separate thing that our spirituality is? How do you bring your spirituality into your humanness and marry the two?
Yeah, that's really interesting you say that the spiritual community that you're dealing with is saying come out of the spirit world so much. And then there's also others who are trying to get into the spiritual world. And then it seems like, oh, it's so miraculous. You know, it's like amazing. And it does feel like an escape a lot of times, right? I would say that I definitely am sensing that same thing, but in a different way, because I don't necessarily work with people in the same way that you do, but that has been very clear for me. For me, it's like a practical thing, like long-term. Okay, that's great and dandy. What do I do with that? You know, like,
yes,
here's these stories about Orion. I mean, even some of the stories we talked about last time.
What does that mean?
Those are great stories, but how does that impact me right now? You know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So that's actually what I do believe I don't think there is one life purpose, but if there was one major one, I would say that is exactly it, because what I now focus on doing is helping people do exactly that. And I have heard multiple times, many times over about, the true spiritual warriors are the ones who, when they come off the mountain and they come back into regular life and they exhibit that. You know, I've got a friend too, she's an energy healer. And I think this was last week, just actually came to the final realization for her that she really doesn't resonate with the word healer. She really resonates with the word activator. And the reason being is she was kind of articulating something which I affirmed, because I knew that before. I didn't necessarily use the words to say it, obviously, in a way that she got it. But by her being who she is, she simply activates people. It's like,
correct.
You know, you're in an environment with other people, and this, let's say person B has a personality, or they have whatever history they have, and it causes them to say or do something that technically triggers you, right?
Yes.
Instigates you into this process of going within and finding the spiritual
Yes.
connection. And that in itself is being spiritual, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because I say this all the time, like I'm not here to heal you. The healer doesn't heal you. The healer is, what I'm here is to create a container and an opportunity for you to heal yourself, because we all are innately capable of and are meant to do this work. It's all an inside job, right? I'm just a facilitator or an activator or a spur, whatever you want to call it. And I agree with that. Like, I think there's this bringing it down. Like, we're not creating gurus anymore. It's not like this like hierarchy where this person is higher than you. It's like we aren't even separate, right? Like, that's a whole other conversation around like separation is an illusion, and there is no such thing as you or I. It's just a different experience. But like you said, it's we are in every connection you have or any interaction you have is an opportunity for you to see the mirror that's being put in front of you, so that you can go inwards and identify those parts that need to be alchemized or whatever is activated inside of you, and then go in to do the inner work. And so, yeah, I think it's so interesting, like that, like you kind of swing one way, right? Where people didn't want to call themselves healers, they called themselves coaches. And then I'm like, but you are healing yourself at the very least, right? And through doing that, you are healing your generational line, you're healing your family, you're healing, like so much healing is happening just by you healing yourself. And so just like, I think it's the swing of going one way and then going the other, of like, own it, be a healer, and then okay, but don't, like, let's not, bring it back a bit. Like you're a facilitator because everyone is healing themselves. So it's almost like we're trying to find this middle ground, where I think when you're saying, going as being escaping into the spiritual realm, is I've seen that so often with people who, when you first encounter spirituality, they have their spiritual awakenings and they have these mountaintop moments, and they don't integrate. They don't go into the depths, right? And so that's a way of spiritual bypassing, right? Because it has to be both. You need to be able to alchemize your darkness, the depths, the lower vibrations, to be able to then bring that back into the world and support those of you here to support, right? But I think a lot of times people want to only focus on the mountaintop moments. We want to only do the things that feel good, and we kind of bypass the parts that aren't so good to look at, nice to experience. And so there is this, I feel like, shift happening where the deeper people get into their spiritual path, they realize it's not all fun and games, right? It like, I think people who have been on this journey for a while, like, we know it's not a dark night of the soul, it is multiple and continuous, right? But I think there's this common misconception of, oh, it's, I'm going to find spirituality that's going to save me, where I think there's so much more to it. And I think there are some people who are misconstruing it, but I also think that it's just normal for people to feel like, oh, I need something to save me, especially since things are so, like, seem to be so horrific right now, right? And it's so interesting looking at it from a spiritual lens, because if you understand how everything is put together, you realize that everything is neutral. Every single thing has no meaning until you give it meaning. And if you're able to really look at everything in that lens, you're going to be able to start seeing how things are happening for you and not to you. And that as you work through that in your own life, you can start looking at the news and just really kind of take a step back and understand that's a soul contract, that's a soul plan, that is karma playing out. There's no no martyrdom necessary. There's no savior complex necessary. These people no one needs you to go and save them. And you basically take yourself out of it and you sit down and tell your ego to be like, they don't need your saving because they are sovereign beings who are co-creating their own realities. But I feel like it feels very harsh for people who don't understand really how the energy works and how energy manifests and how we are creating from our subconscious. And so to someone who is in the fear dynamic, in the survival mode, to someone like that who cannot see past their own pain and cannot understand that everything in their life is there to help them wake up and realize that there's more to what they see than just their fear. To them, it seems like, oh my goodness, if I just find spirituality, I'll just find the savior, you can save me. And it's so easy to be, one, either manipulated in that state, but also to put someone on a pedestal and be like, you're going to save me.
Yeah. And actually what I'm actually seeing, it was very personal for me, even just yesterday, but what I'm actually seeing is not only a call to make it practical and how do you actually implement this into your everyday life, but also, as you had described before, part of this whole process is pulling back and watching it non-objectively, meaning there's no judgment of anything that occurs. So trying to pull back from the emotions, because that's usually what engulfs us, right? So pulling back from that, and here's the other part, this is what I'm seeing right now, is the attachment to whatever it is with which you identify yourself, right?
100%.
So it's pulling back and watching that and saying, okay, I experience this thing, whatever it is, I am experiencing it, but it is not who I am. Right. And so when you're able to pull back from that, then you can choose to either go back into it and experience it, feel the emotions or whatever, or you can say, you know what, that's not aligned for me. That doesn't work for me. Now I'm going to shift my focus to something else. And then you become a much more powerful manifester in a sense, right? That's the word.
100%.
Right.
Yes.
So that's where I'm seeing it is. Yes, it is absolutely about being practical, bringing that spirituality down to your everyday life, but not just that, but to recognize that you are not whatever you're identifying yourself with.
Correct. Fill in the blank. That is not who you are. Also, you do not exist. Right. If we really want to bring it, like the you that you think you are does actually not exist. That is a figment of your imagination. Like this all is a dream, and we are just players in a game. And it is sometimes it can hurt your brain to think that way, but it is also very freeing because if you have no attachment, then you don't attach to your thoughts, you don't attach to the feelings, you don't attach to the people around you, you don't attach to the stories in your head. That is the ultimate, like that's what the Buddha speaks of, right? Like the state of being unattached. That's what meditation is all about, to be able to observe the observer and to observe your thoughts. And, if you think of your thoughts as a river, you're sitting on the bank and watching your thoughts. You are not your thoughts. But that requires people to actually pause and take a minute to be able to create space between the thought and the reaction so that they can observe that thought as something that is just an experience or a neural pathway that was created before they were 7 years old, or a story that was said to them, right? But it requires you to create separation, create stillness, and create some type of pause. And in today's day and age, telling people to just sit down in silence for 5 minutes without doom scrolling, and you know what I mean? Like there's no space for that. But that is why we came here, right? Like we came here to be able to remember in a time when it was so hard to remember. Because I always say, if you were meant to be a monk, you would be. That's not what you chose. You chose this life. Every single day when you wake up, you chose it. Because if you didn't want to be back in the simulation, you would die in your sleep, just randomly, right? Your heart would stop. that is how much control you really have on this simulation that we're in. And so when you wake up in the morning, that is another opportunity, and that your soul wanted you to experience more. There was more for you to experience, more to learn, more in this life. And so even though it may feel like either it's too much or there's nothing for you to learn, or whatever the reason is, there actually is, like, you're not here. I think a lot of people think, especially starting to in this virtual world, and especially starseeds, they're like, I feel like I'm in prison here. I was sent here, the memes, like, I didn't sign up for this. You did sign up for this. This is all consent based, right? You did volunteer as tribute, and you're volunteering as tribute every single day. Every minute of every day, you have the opportunity to go, am I still in the matrix right now? Or am I going to really look at what is happening right now and be in this moment, which is basically the only one that exists, right? But yeah, you're like, what you're saying is like so true, because I think, especially in the West, there's such a big thing about identity, especially like even identity politics, right? Like, I am presenting as a female person of color, right? And this is the avatar I chose, but that's just what it is. That's the avatar I chose because I knew what it came with, and like the opportunities it was going to bring me to learn the lessons that I needed to learn. And if you can understand it, it is literally as if you are playing a video game and you had options and you chose specific characteristics, specific family, all of these things were chosen by your soul so that you can learn something, not that it is, it doesn't create who you are as a soul identity. It is purely just an avenue and a vehicle that is going to help you play the game that we're in. And so, yes, there is a lot that comes with being a person of color or being a woman, and there's a lot that comes with that choice. But to stop making that choice be or say something about you, like you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And it's much easier to see when you actually, I think, obviously personal trauma is something that will kickstart somebody into this, right? Because basically they can't tolerate whatever is going on. And so they have to find a different solution. And this is the solution that they come to. But you could say that same thing is happening collectively as well. I mean,
100%.
Even if you just look at the world during COVID, absolutely. We, at a minimum, one of the foundations that we realize as a human species, is that there is a need for connection. There is a need for genuine interaction with people and an acknowledgement for that. And so I think that it upped, because it was the trauma that we were all experiencing at the same time.
100%.
It caused us to all recognize that more than maybe we had before, and then actually verbalize it and take action on it and so forth. And so I think all of those things are really just helping us all as a human species to ascend, because we're, we've called that forth. I mean, I can remember when it first came out, I sensed that. I was like, oh boy, this is going to be big, Then to experience what it was in the United States, it reminded me very much of 9/11. I can remember I was like, I think I was like 23 or something around I had just gotten engaged. And then this thing happened, and it was on, we're watching on TV at work, and then it never turned off. They just kept on with the news. And, at some point, a lot of people just realized, I can't watch that anymore. Like I can't watch that doom and gloom and have it like it's physically affecting me, and I think we all have to kind of get to that point. But it is, how do we take it, bring it into our physical bodies, bring it into our 3D world, interact with other people with it, and how do we merge the two?
Yes.
Like, so something that came through Monday night for me, oh no, it wasn't Monday. I think it was last week, actually. I was channeling and I was trying to describe what was coming through, and it was for a group of people who were practicing channeling. And the description was, it's going to be as easy as it is for you to turn your eyes to something else to look at. So just the motion of you shifting your
Mm-hmm.
eyes to a different
Mm-hmm.
focal point. That's what shifting your energy is. It's that easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's all the programming, the experiences we've had that stops it from happening, where we have to actually acknowledge, oh, this is what's there's a belief system, or there's a thought, or there's a feeling that's getting in the way of
Yes.
me being able to shift my focus. Because when I
Yeah.
shift focus, then boom, it's all changed.
It does. It's like I don't know if you've heard of brain spotting, but that is it's like basically it's a practice where, because every um your brain categorizes, and your eye movements, it kind of brings into EMDR, but your eye movements hold specific traumas or specific wounds or experiences. And by focusing on a specific spot where that experience was programmed into, you can rewrite that and kind of work through that specific experience, for example. And that's what kind of came to me as you were talking. But I think people don't realize how programmed we are. Like
Yeah.
we are, like the programming, especially in the US. Living in South Africa, I grew up in a different environment. I did watch US. I did watch US like TV, etc. But it's not as. I feel like I'm able to kind of step out of it a little bit more than my husband. And same thing, I knew where I was when 9/11 happened. I was in elementary school, and I was not even in this country. But I remember I feel like everyone knows where they were on 9/11, right? And so you're right. There was such a pivotal moment that I think was orchestrated to be able to wake people up, which is the same with 2020. And I was just talking about this morning to people, and I was like, as above, so below, right? So everything you're experiencing and the triggers and all of that, and the fact that it takes you to break two elbows, right, to stop, is the same with the collective.
Yeah.
This is going to only get worse. It's only going to get worse, and not in a doom and gloom type of way, but people need to reach rock bottom to wake up, unfortunately. Some people may wake up easier, and it doesn't have to get that bad. But most people, they are not going to listen to the little whisper and the little like nudge. And no, you need to be kicked off the mountain before you're going to actually like make change. And that's just how we are. That's just how humans are. And I think as we are getting to a point where the collective needs to really like on en masse, not just one at a time, like things are going to get worse before they get better. But also, if you understand the laws of the universe, like entropy works in a way where if a system is broken, it basically needs to be broken first before it can be fixed. Yeah. And so the system is being broken one thing at a time, right? One realization, people waking up to, oh my goodness, maybe I shouldn't watch news all day, or maybe I shouldn't eat red dye, or maybe, all of these things that we just were programmed into us as that's just how things are. We don't question it. These things are becoming so glaringly obvious that we cannot not see it. And so the things are just going to get worse because that's how people realize it. It's like the hyperbole needs to happen before people really see what is happening. And they kind of was just like turning a blind eye to it, which I feel like is so, all these, the metaphors around turning a blind eye or like looking a different way or changing your perspective, it has all to do with that, what you just said. It is and will be as easy as just shifting where you look. And I think most people are just so used to doing the same thing. They're just in the same rhythm. They're just habitually like very, they don't really question a lot of things. And so it requires like that big wake up moment for them to be like, I was literally asleep. I've been doing this same thing forever. And there isn't like, I'm not even aware of it.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting. I think as a species, we are shifting things, but in ways that are not quite as tangible all the time for everybody. If I think about it, what you're saying now reminds me of these generational changes. Like,
Yes.
for example, my generation dealt with the typical kind of traumas that we would have for that generation, right? And so
Yes.
as adults, when we bring children into this world, we have two choices. We can either operate the way that we were, raised,
Mm-hmm.
or we can make a change. And then what happens is, you've got the next generation that operates in an entirely different way. So, for example, with my children's generation, which I think is just now, I think it's kind of shifted there. There's this idea of gentle parenting, and I've seen a lot of
Mm-hmm.
mockery of it. And I totally
Mm-hmm.
get that because I've experienced the non-gentle parenting and then the gentle parenting. And it's really interesting being a parent at this time because
Mm-hmm.
you start to, you see the things that gave you trauma. You've done
Mm-hmm.
the work to figure out what it is that was so traumatic for you about that. You've healed it, you see it, and you're like, nope, not doing that. And then
Mm-hmm.
even if you're able within a safe container with your children are able to not do that. And so they don't experience it. They go out in the world and you go out in the world. And then you've got people say, well, why didn't you do XYZ? Because this is
Mm-hmm.
better.
Mm-hmm.
And, you either make the choice to interact with that and say, I understand where you're coming from, but that doesn't work for me because of whatever reasons, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then things start to shift. But I think we see that within the generations. And I think typically you have younger generations that seem to irritate the older generations for these reasons, right?
Yes.
But
Mm-hmm.
they're generally speaking, as humans, we seem to evolve into a better space. So like I would say the younger generation now, I don't know if that's what Z or whatever they are. Um, they, body positivity, that was not something that was
Mm-hmm.
around when I
Oh
was
my
young.
goodness.
Okay.
These videos, since we had videos, the videos of MTV
Yeah.
in interviews and the way that they treated these young women on the red carpet and the things they asked them, just watching it is so cringeworthy now. But we watched that when we were younger, right?
Yeah.
And no one like that was how it was. That's
Yeah.
just the conversations they had. They talked about their bodies all the time.
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yeah. And now we have, and I'll be honest, I'm one of those where my children experience things and they're interacting with somebody else and they are telling me something that's happening that is essentially not aligning for them,
Yeah.
or and or probably both, they're not being able to communicate with this person in the way that they're able to hear what they're saying.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
as a mother, I'm like, okay, give me some more information about the context of the thing. But my answer is always, you take care of yourself. If they're telling you to do something that really doesn't align for you and
Mm-hmm.
it's not going to be good long term, then just
Mm-hmm.
don't do it. It doesn't matter
Don't do
what they
it.
say. It doesn't matter what they
Yeah.
threaten you with or what have you, because that's the typical kind of response. And so you have
Yeah.
young people who are willing to say, nope,
No.
not doing that. And
Which is
it is friction there, right? Like there's a lot.
yes.
Yeah. But it is
Because young people
healing
aren't
subconscious things.
100% like young, like growing up, kids are only aren't supposed to be heard. They should just be
Yeah.
seen. Like all of these things of this, like the stories that we are rewriting for our children. But it is interesting when you start like looking at the ways that your children help you on your healing journey. Like being a parent is such an initiation, and it is continuously showing you the parts of yourself that still need love and parts of your inner child that still need healing. And it's it's such a gift to be able to like both be a shepherd. I always say like my children, my daughter was and children are gifted to us, and it's such a an honor to have been chosen by her soul to be able to help her through this life. um, but also, I think the thing with gentle parenting that I love is the part that people don't speak of, which I think is um, the self responsibility that the parent needs to take as to like what is happening inside of me that is activating me about this child's behavior, and how can I go now and do my inner work so that I can show up in a regulated state, and or I can figure out like, why is this so triggering to me? Which I think is such a shift in our parents and older generations. And I think that's why it's so hard for them when we make choices for our children or for our families that are different than theirs, because that the second part, that is not something that they are used to or even know how to do, right? They have no clue how to do inner work, how to, look at themselves in the mirror and take self-responsibility and say that they're sorry. Like I say sorry to my daughter all day long. Thank you for telling me that. I am so sorry I hurt your feelings. I can't remember the last time. Like the only time my parents said sorry to me was when after they gave me like a spanking. Then my mom would say sorry. Like all of that is a whole other conversation. I know, right? I was lucky, I guess, in a way. But it's the way that I just hear myself speaking to her, and then obviously when I'm with my in-laws, the comments are always a whole thing, and it is sitting with the discomfort and being able to then go and do something about it. That is hard for most people. Like no matter what your age is, no matter what generation it is, it's not fun to have to sit with the discomfort of your child bringing something up in you. And 9 times out of 10, it was basically your inner child at that age who's come online and is looking for something from you, and you're reacting in the way that your parents reacted towards you, which is probably not healthy. And then it's like this whole spiral if you're not aware of the dynamics, and you're just, you're kind of just like in the same rhythm as your parents were, or like, there's no awareness. And I think that's the first thing, is like the awareness of your child is going to trigger you. 9 times out of 10, if your 7-year-old shows up and she triggers you, your 7-year-old will be the one that's driving the bus or taking over. And so you need to check yourself, and it's not your 7-year-old's fault that you got activated. And I think that's a big shift what I realized. And I'm seeing a little bit of this, where I think a lot of times in the like healing world, people try and say that you triggered me, and so you need to do something different, or like it's your fault. Yes. And it's so interesting because that's not how I believe it works at all, because your triggers are opportunities for you to identify where there's things for you to work on internally. And yes, you can communicate that and set a boundary. And if someone loves you, they will respect that boundary. And if they don't, then that, again, it's your responsibility to hold your boundary. And so it always comes back to self-responsibility every single time. And I think there is this disconnect sometimes when I listen to people speak about like in the healing realm of like, it's almost like putting the onus on someone else to like walk on eggshells.
Well, that's again, it's referring back to the human constructs, right? Like, so there's a couple of things here that I'm saying. So one thing I do want to address, which we were mentioning before, is this idea of not questioning things fully, or maybe does that mean that we have to, like, I still feel like there's an undertone within I don't know if it's the whole world, but definitely as Americans, undertone of, okay, so this person, let's say that this conversation is saying we're not questioning things enough. Mm-hmm. So how much do I have to question to get it right? Like how far do I have to go to be on the right side? Because that's on the wrong side, right? But that's not what we're saying. We're saying it's just a process.
Correct.
And again, it's that subconscious patterning or structure or belief systems that say there has to be a wrong and a right.
And a right. Yes.
There doesn't have to be.
Yes. No, there's no such thing as wrong or right. It's all an experience. Everything is neutral. It's all like, if you interact with something, that means that your subconscious, one, created that, two, and your superconscious provided the consent for that to happen for you and not to you. And so you're a sovereign being. So you actually cannot give your power away. That is impossible. Well, someone can't take your power away from you. You are giving your power away in every situation. And it's hard to hear because it's so easy for us to step into the victim role. And especially if you have big T trauma, it's so hard to get to a point to realize that the horrible things that happen to you, there's a reason for that. And that was, you chose that path to be able to learn something from it. But there isn't anything anyone can do to you that you didn't either co-create from a subconscious level or agree to from a superconscious level. This is all your own. Like, we're all playing our own little game, and everything around us we create, and you can't abdicate your responsibility to someone else. But it's so hard to have that conversation with people, especially people who are just so used to being the victim and wanting to blame others for their experiences.
Well, and it's perpetuated. Like, even as you were talking there, was reminding me of when I finally heard a phrase that made sense. So, I entertained, I read a couple things here or there, and I understood it, and I got it all that. Talking about empaths. And, you can type in empath and get all kinds of stuff on there. And, what is an empath? How does it work? Da, 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 da. Okay. Then they go shift to energy vampires. Okay. And that is 100% blame game. 100%. So I finally heard somebody, one of my healers, said, there is no energy vampire. It's exactly what you just said, which is you are allowing that person. Right? Yeah. You're allowing that experience for you to essentially allow your energy to go out or deplete or shift or whatever. And so you're still in ownership. So if you're the one who's owning it, then you can just stop that immediately. You don't even have to really do anything. You just, that's it. I'm done. But it's that, there was something else you were saying was reminding me of this, you use the word news several times. So we're talking about like the way that things are presented in the news, it sensationalizes everything.
Yes.
Right? And not everything, well, not even not everything. That is a human way of being that may make it feel like it's more intense, but in reality, it's not. It's the same thing. Even honestly, yesterday, the thing for me was last week, I started feeling quite a bit better with my elbows. And so we're at like 2 months now, which is good. And yesterday, my arms were killing me. Like, just hurt, woke me up at 4:00 in the morning. And then by about 7:00, somebody asked me, and I'm like, nope, it's been hurting since 4:30 this morning, and I realized that it really comes from me going back into that subconscious pattern, because part of my lessons about breaking my elbows is to stop trying to do so many different things. And I knew that was like the first thing, right? But last week I found myself, I had this meeting and I had this meeting and I saw these people and I did this thing, and I could feel that coming on, but how to know what to do differently, that was a different thing. So luckily I had a friend who said, hey, I'm sensing this about you right now. Like, yeah, you're right. You're exactly right. And then it just kind of came on, and we all have to find our own way to shift it. So even though I've done all this spiritual work, done all, for so long, here I am. I still have the same situation. You still go back on those subconscious patterns.
Yeah. And it is just having so much compassion, because again, if there was nothing more for you to learn and experience, you would not wake up in the morning, right? So like, there's still, and not to say that, it's going to continue to like be learning, or like, I think a lot of people have this like, when I'm going to be fully healed, like when is this no longer going to be a pattern? When it's no longer a pattern, that's when.
Yeah.
Whenever it's no longer a pattern, it will stop being a pattern. That is, and I think we don't realize that. I had a session this morning with a client, and we did some big shifts, and really like there was a ton of parts that came up, and so she was like, but I don't want to do this anymore, and I don't want to respond this way anymore, and I don't want to continue this pattern. How do I not do that anymore? And I'm like, well, for now, right now, what we're going to do after the session is you're going to integrate, and you're going to go outside and ask the elementals to help you integrate all of the shifts, and you're going to wait, because the universe and the energy, how energy works is you have now shifted your perspective. You have more awareness about this pattern. you are putting out there the vibration of, I am no longer going to give my power away. There are going to be opportunities in your day, in your week, probably in that, like not even right. Like I think if you're aware enough, you can see it immediately. Opportunities where you'll be able to put in practice this new response or this new perspective. It's so the universe is an echo, right? It'll echo back to you what you put out there. So if you say, I'm no longer, I have decided, and I have decided that I'm no longer going to give away my power. I am aware of this pattern, and I've integrated all of these parts. We did all of this work. Okay, so here are some opportunities for you to now. It's basically like you've learned for the test. Now the test is coming, and you're going to have the opportunity to respond in a different way. You don't have to know, immediately how to change your response. It is going to happen. It's going to come into your field, and there's going to be opportunities, whether it's a person in your life, whether it's an opportunity for you to say no, where you normally would have said yes. That is how this works. You're co-creating from your subconscious. And so we are manifestors, regardless of, like, people always like, oh, I need to learn how to manifest. You are a manifestor.
Doing it already.
You're doing it. You are a manifestation of source energy in physicality. That in itself is manifesting. So you don't need to learn how to manifest. You need to learn how to stop subconsciously manifesting and start being more aware and consciously being manifesting and changing the neural pathways and the stories of what you're putting out there. And so I was like, whenever it happens, because it's going to happen either today or this week, but we have like Voxer, as well in our container. Let me know whenever something comes in your field where you have the opportunity to give away your power or not give away your power. And that's how we change our behavior. It's not through like, and that's why I feel like that's where the, like, coming full circle, how we bring it into the practical is bring it off of the mat, right? When you talk about meditation and you talk to yogis or you talk to Buddhists, how do you bring what your practice is on the mat? How do you bring it off of the mat? So you're channeling and you're hearing all of these new things. Okay. So then when you go into your real life, how are you going to implement the things that you now know, the new perspective, the change in awareness, the stories? How are you now going to respond differently? And that's how you integrate, that's how you embody this new quote unquote version, which is basically just more the version of you who is not being blocked by, the stories, the ego, and all of that. And so it's not necessarily like this, like people always like, can you just tell me what I need to do? And just tell me what are all the things I need to do? And it's like, life gives you opportunities to change your response every minute of the day. And you can either be aware of that and make an aware and conscious choice to no longer respond in the same way, or you can just continue doing the same thing. It's your choice.
Well, I think that's what, when we first started talking, it was about like, where are you sensing the energies now? And I think that speaks directly to what we're seeing, not only out in the world, but I think we as, whatever you want to call them, healers, facilitators, activators, whatever they are. That's what we're seeing in the collective, is that we are now all starting to walk with each other in community instead of it being this other person, this other theoretical energy, this other is the one who's going to give me the answer. But in reality, you simply go together and you experience it all together and give your comments about it and share and support each other and then trigger one another. And then, just like before, get mad about it and then be like, okay, now am I going to act like I was before? Or am I going to realize that I'm mad about this because I'm mad about something within me? And am I going to do that shift, or am I going to put that on the other person? So it's just this beautiful evolution from going outside of the self to we're all kind of recognizing we have to go within the self, but now we're really looking at doing it in community.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's such a big theme that I picked up on, at least of the last, even like in the last year, of like community and coming together, and reestablishing that felt sense of being in community that we've lost,
Yeah.
as a society, but especially even in the spiritual community. It Because this is sometimes such a personal experience, going through, dark night of the soul, going through your awakenings. um it it can be very isolating, and because there weren't that many people that could even create a community, 6, 7, 10 years ago, now that more people even are coming out of the woodwork of like, oh, I say the most crazy out there thing, and someone's like, oh my gosh, I agree. And I'm like, where'd you come from? Great, we're friends now.
Mhm.
And you gotta just find them all kind of sprinkled out around. Um, and I think now is the time for us to come together, because I do believe that we are made to be in community and made to be in communal healing, and to bring, like, you know, one of us is powerful, but together we can be so much more powerful and alchemize just so much more, and heal the earth, heal the, like, just heal everything ourselves. Because I think relationship is such an, in addition to like parenthood, but in other initiations, but relationships are such a great initiation as well, for you to be able to, like you said, mirror each other, trigger each other, come back together. But finding that community, whether it's local, whether it's online, I think it just adds another layer to your spiritual practice and your spiritual depth, where you can be, service to others, like serving each other, whilst also like holding space for one another, which I feel like I'm seeing so many just like pop up all over in my city, online, and it's just so beautiful to see where we're coming together in such a space that's not. And I really like, when I walked away from the church, that was something that I think a lot of people struggle with, because that the church does a lot of things right or wrong, but the one thing it does right is the community aspect of it,
Yes,
right?
I
The
agree. Yeah.
the aspect of understanding and recognizing, and really fostering that sense of like belonging, um, in a very weirdly not healthy way, but underneath they recognize the importance of humans being, pack animals at the very
Yeah.
primal
Yeah. No, I
nature.
totally agree. And it's kind of funny. That's why I was laughing, is that that's actually the thing that I disliked the most. And it wasn't the idea of community, it was
Mm-hmm.
the way that it was executed in my experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And it had to do with the ego or the mind taking too much
Mm-hmm.
precedence. So it was
Mm-hmm.
like you had to be in the right clothes, or you had to say the right thing, or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever those things are that are of the superficial. That's what I
Mm-hmm.
felt like was driving it. I knew it wasn't, otherwise I wouldn't have been there. There are some
Mm-hmm.
parts where the communities in those groups are in fact genuine. They're really connecting on a spiritual level, and those are great communities to be part of.
Mm-hmm.
But it's almost like
Mm-hmm.
you have to filter through all the rest of it to be able to find that. But I do feel like we definitely are going that way as a species, and that's the only way to go. I can't imagine going. I mean, to go the other way would essentially create Armageddon, or those things that we're talking about, doom and gloom, where we stop taking
Mm-hmm.
care of the earth entirely, and then, well, we all die off or whatever. But so there's those two, like we can go which way,
Options.
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we're hopefully not going that way.
Yeah.
We are headed in a direction, and hopefully it is the right one, or the one of healing and the one of ascension, and not the one of the planet being completely destroyed, because that's an option too, like you said, that has happened before
Okay.
on other planets.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people have that in their soul, history
Yeah.
of experiencing what it is like. And I think that's a lot of people I speak to, or starseeds, are like, they don't necessarily consciously remember it, but they can pick up on the
this behavior is going to go towards that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Mystical and Infamous podcast with the Happy Lion Center. Send requests for topic discussions, questions, and comments to podcast@happylioncenter.com. That's podcast@happylioncenter.com.